Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Today interview. Today's guest is Secretary General and Executive Director at PMI Mongolia. PMI stands for Project Management Institute. He's also a resident director of the American Center for Mongolian Studies, Mr. Marc A.Tasse. Good evening, sir.
Nice to meet you, Bill. Good time.
Thank you for coming.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So tell us about PMI. What's the organization?
So PMI is the largest certifying and training organization related to project management in the world. We're in 180 countries. There's 260 chapters spread throughout, and its basic mission is to improve the quality of projects and the delivery of projects across all sectors. Across all sectors,
right. And can you tell us about some upcoming projects you guys are working on?
Sure. So PMI itself, within Mongolia, is an education organization. So what we focus on is, through our volunteers, we focus on training Mongolian project managers to run their projects more efficiently, run them closer to scheduled budgets, and make better use of the resources that are available. And those are three things that tends to be an issue with some of the projects that are going here within Mongolia. So what we've been doing is working with organizations like Rio Tinto, Jacobs, Erdnus Mongol, Hasbank, Hanbank, as well as IT Zone and a lot of other different organizations across sectors in Mongolia to help train their staff and their people to deliver their projects more effectively.
So you guys advise and train the staff of the companies, right? And can you tell us about the conference?
Yes. So part of what we're doing is in training and workshops. But one of the big things that we do every year to promote the information about project management is an annual conference that we run. It's the first weekend of October. So this year it's October 6th and 7th here in UB. And we have about 450 participants that come out. And these are project managements from different organizations, people from government. And we also have delegates from Japan, Korea, Hong Kong, Taiwan, China, Singapore, and other places that come also to participate in our conference and share their knowledge and their information. And the main focus for the conference is just that. It's information sharing. So day one, we have about 25 different presenters from different organizations within Mongolia, focusing on how they've incorporated the trainings and the work that we've done over the last 5 years, and how they've been implementing that within their organizations, and how they've been seeing efficiencies that are coming through. And then the second day is, again, using some of these people here in the country to share their knowledge, their information, and do actual trainings and workshops for the participants as we go.
So these delegates, international delegates, are here to share their experience or to get experience from you guys?
Well, both, actually. So we partner with different chapters within Asia-Pacific region. So they'll send representatives to bring an outside perspective of how projects are run in Japan or Korea or places like that. But they also bring some of their own people, because Mongolia creates and presents very unique challenges in managing projects. And they actually come here to network and to talk to the people here within the country to find out how is Mongolia dealing with those challenges and looking for those lessons learned and those key opportunities to then be able to bring back to their countries and to their chapters and to share with them as they go through.
I'm sure the experiences in different countries, they're all different because of the society, because of the infrastructure and everything, right?
Well, it presents different challenges. So through PMI, I've been able to travel to the different countries and present about how we run projects here within Mongolia and how we've been developing. And one of the things that we often work with and we talk about in that process is efficiency, to really run a project properly in Mongolia, because the size of the country, you're limited in your resource and your population pool. Funding is usually very tight, right? And timelines and resources are usually restricted as you go through. So to develop a really high quality project within Mongolia, you really need to learn to be very efficient and very effective in using your people, your personnel, your equipment, your material. So when you compare that to, let's say, a project in Japan or in South Korea, where they have lots of people, lots of money, and lots of equipment, project managers tend to get lazy. So when they look at Mongolia, they see it, and they see the projects we run, they say, how are you able to do that with that number of people and that level of budget? So they're really looking at finding out how we're making those efficiencies and learning from Mongolia as we go through.
Also learning, right.
They're learning from Mongolia. Yeah.
So how long have you guys organizing this national conference?
So we started working on PMI in 2012 to get chartered and registered through the national organization.
Right.
And then we got chartered 4 years ago in 2014. And we launched our first conference at that year. And the first 3 years of the conferences was just educating people about who we are, what we're doing, and what project management is. So now this year the focus is more of what are the lessons learned, what are the skills that we've developed over the last 4 or 5 years, and how can the people who've been involved share that information, that knowledge with other project managers.
So about Mongolia, what are the improvements that you guys you have seen? Personally, maybe from the organization perspective, and what are the challenges we are still looking at when it comes to implementing projects?
Well, what we're seeing is a recognition that there is a process, that project management isn't just something that happens and it just develops on its own. There's a process and there's a step and a way of going through it, that there's a specific methodology. And we're seeing more and more organizations sending their people to learn that methodology and figuring out how do we incorporate this into our company, our ministry, our institution as we're going through. So that's the good part. We're seeing this development as they go along. The other thing that we're seeing also is we're seeing beginnings of increases in efficiency. We're seeing increases in better use of resources within our projects, which is making them closer to being delivered on time, on budget, and into the level of quality that's being done. So those are some of the things that we're seeing is burgeoning as going through. I think that the biggest thing is the education and the understanding of that project manager is not just somebody that you say, okay, you're in charge of this and run it. That it's actually a profession. There's skills and there's techniques and there's abilities that are needed for developing that. So we're starting to see companies that are specifically asking for individuals who had some training or some certification in project management and putting those people in charge of the projects, which is good. Right. Some of the challenges we're still seeing and we're still hearing from the people who are participating in the trainings, coming to the conference, the information's not necessarily trickled all the way up. So senior management, the C-level, doesn't really see or doesn't fully understand the value of what this sort of system and this process can bring to them. So that's a lot of what we're focusing on, is more that senior management now at this point of getting some comprehensive understanding of the value of project management. And so then from there, bringing it down.
When you're saying senior managers, senior management level, are they older people?
Part of that is yes.
What's the age range?
Well, we're looking at, if you look at a ministry or if you're looking at a company like Ernest Mongol or Newcom or places like that, you're looking at people who have been in their job, they've been in the industry for a long time. They're usually trained either here in Mongolia, educated in Mongolia, or possibly went and studied in Russia or post-Soviet states. So they've got a different approach of how to run a project. A project run in a socialist environment is not as strict as when you're looking at a capitalist, where money is important, resource allocation is important, and getting the value of the project becomes important. And we're seeing shifts of that because there's now international players involved in a lot of the projects, whether it's in the supply chain of providing equipment or as engineers and consultants or as funders. They're slowly increasing their expectation of the delivery of Mongolia and the projects that are being run internally. Because ideally, they want to see Mongolia run their own projects. They don't need to keep bringing foreign experts to do these things. It's expensive. So the goal is to build that capacity internally so that Mongolia creates the same level of competence as there is globally within managing their projects internally. And that, I think, combined with Mongolia's unique perspective of people tend to be polyglots. If you speak to most Mongolians, they speak at least 2 languages. Most of them speak 3, and a lot of them speak 4, 5, 6 different languages. And between that, the high education level and the quality of the education that the Mongolians are receiving, and this global concept of how to understand the management of projects, there's an export opportunity or a consulting or a business opportunity that Mongolia can take advantage of. of using these people to really become part of that global community.
Global network.
Exactly.
To be part of that.
And it's an expertise that Mongolia can easily bring in. So that's a lot of what we're also working on is developing. We're happy to see that a few of our earlier participants have now been promoted to positions, let's say within Rio Tinto, and they're now being moved out of country to run projects in China. Jacobs has done the same thing with some of our people, and they've moved their people into China. Rio's moved people into Australia to run projects out of country because of their training and their experience here in Mongolia.
And again, can you tell us one more reason why we need PMI?
The main reason I think why we need PMI is because we're dealing in a global environment. Projects are being run with global partners in one way or another, whether it's supply chain, funding, as we're going through. And those partners are requiring project management and project management certification. So if you look at the fastest growing market for certification is Asia. China is pumping out 40,000 project managers per year through PMI. India is pumping out about 20,000 project managers per year. China, South Korea, it's the same. They're producing these people in the thousands. And they're working within their companies and their organizations. So when they come to Mongolia to oversee or review a project, their expectation is that the projects will be run under these standards, under these processes.
Totally different environment.
Totally different environment. So, which didn't exist 5 years ago. So now we're starting to see companies and people coming and saying, we need to be trained because our partner is, is this foreign partner, and they're expecting us to be doing this. So I think that is right now the big push is to make people realize that this is an advantage for the companies to bring to that global market.
Very nice. So how long have you been living in Mongolia?
So I originally came here for 6 months, roughly about 5 years ago, back in 2013.
5 years ago.
So I came here to work for the American Center for Mongolian Studies, to do an assessment and take a look at what the operation was and decide on the future direction for it. And I liked what I was seeing, and I liked the potential and the energy of what was here, the drive to learn and improve, which is impressive. I've worked in 10 different countries in Asia and Europe, and Mongolia really impressed me with their true desire to figure out a way to compete on a global scale. So that's what really attracted me, and that's what got me involved with PMI here, and that's what keeps me here still.
So Mongolia gives you a real challenge, right?
It's an interesting place.
It's an interesting place.
It's an interesting place. There's many dichotomies within Mongolia. You look at Ulaanbaatar, and then you look at the countryside, the Sums and Yaimags and the bogs in the countryside. Very different lifestyles and very different attitudes and approaches from the people. You look at perceptions and different things. There's things that are very high tech, like what we're doing here now, cell phone use, internet use within Mongolia. But there's still other things that are almost archaic. They're still done the way they were done 20, 30 years ago. So it's interesting to see how these things survive and exist within Mongolia.
Mix.
Well, and it creates opportunities, and it creates opportunities for people to do different things.
So, okay, the next question is a tricky one. What do you not like about Mongolia?
So probably, and everyone will probably say this, the biggest challenge of living in Mongolia is the winters. Not just the weather and the temperature, but right now, especially living in UB, the air quality. And these are some of the new projects through the ACMS and other agencies we work with that we're looking at trying to address is some air quality issues. Air quality is probably the most difficult thing. Language. I've been here for almost 5 years. I've been trying to learn Mongolian for almost 5 years, and it's still not working very well. I can survive if I'm stuck in the middle of nowhere, but conversations with friends usually very quickly spin to English because they get, they get tired of waiting for me to figure out what to say. So the language becomes a challenge. But I think part of it is also if you look at the country and the development of what's happening, is to a certain extent there isn't a centralized plan of how to move forwards. There's different people with different ideas pulling in different directions, but there's not really that communication of coming up with a unified strategy of how do we deal with the economy, how do we deal with some healthcare issues that are here within the country, how do we deal with training and employment. there's not a plan. The universities don't talk to each other to a certain extent. Ministries don't talk to each other. And that creates a little bit of the chaos that we're seeing.
It's my last question.
Okay.
My brand question.
Okay.
What book are you on?
What book am I reading right now? So I've always got multiple books going at the same time.
Okay.
And some of them are work-related, some of them are just for fun. So my work-related book that I'm working on right now is a book focusing on the history and the evolution of modern medicine.
Modern
which
medicine.
Which it's an interesting book and it's fun. But the other book that I've started reading is an American author who's written a fantasy story about what would life be like during the time of Genghis Khan. And it's sort of
really?
Yeah, so it's sort of
That
a
sounds
historical
interesting.
fiction that goes through and talking about how Genghis rose into the modern empire. A little bit different than what the historians that I work with through the ACMS and their perspective.
And it's a fiction.
It's fiction, yeah.
Can you tell me the name?
I can pull it up for you and give it to you. The book itself is called Conquer.
Conqueror.
And the author is, and he's got a very strange name, and I'm forgetting it right now. But
well,
yeah,
it's a Conqueror. The book name.
The book is called Conquer. There's
I'm
5
sure I
books
could
in the
find it.
series.
5 books in the series, and
yeah.
it's all about life.
From birth to death of Genghis Khan, and his visualization of what it must have been like in the Mongol Empire.
That could be very interesting perspective
yeah,
then.
It's some parts are interesting, some parts are
absurd.
yeah, some parts are a little strange, but that's okay. It's fun to read.
Well, thank you very much, sir. And,
thank you very much for your time.
Yes, thank you for sharing all this knowledge and your ideas, and especially PMI's mission.
Thank you.
And I wish you health and good luck.
Thank you very much.
That's all for today. Thank you for being with us. You're watching Today. We will see you on next Tuesday with more news and stories. Have a good one. Bye-bye.